to also probably.
Let's get started. All right, so here's the what I'm going to show you tonight is absolutely what I have found to be revolutionary, because we've been talking about creating change, but we never got down to the deepest level of change. And the deep, we looked at the first one, we looked at data, stuff that happens, and then how people experience it, and then the different levels of causality. Most of the time, it's looking at actions, it's looking at beliefs, it's looking at it on those levels. Most disciplines operate in those spheres. But what I'm going to show you today is hopefully it will blow your mind, because there's nobody else that I know out there in the world talking about this in this way. And if you actually apply it, you can have amazing change instantly if you apply what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so fasten your seat belt. The deepest level of change happens on the structural level. So it doesn't matter anything else that we talked about in terms of causality. Structure is absolutely the deepest level. Okay, so if you look at for example, some of the items that might be operating on a structural level, you may look at poverty, for example. Somebody is in poverty, that absolutely determines what they are able to do. There are certain limits that they can only go as far. Let's say, for example, in health, if someone is in a wheelchair, they're wanting to do a marathon, wouldn't be possible because of the structural limitations there. Same thing with law. If you break the law, you still break the law, whether you get caught or not. It's still breaking the law. The law is what the law is. There are customs that we all live in, the Muslim customs, the Afrikaans customs, whatever. And those things are very influential on what it is that we can do inside of those structures. Now, here's the thing I'm going to say to you, and the last one being ability. You cannot change a structure. You can't change a structure. So if you're trying to change and you're trying to change the structure, all you can do is bump up against the limits of that structure. What you can do is create another structure, but you can't change the one that you're in. So what I'm going to show you is something to get around that problem as we move forward here. Now, structures operate on a continuum. On an external level, the sun coming up and going down every day is completely outside of your control. We can't control that at all. But as we start to move on the continuum, we start to move towards internal structures. And the more internal it is, the more control you have. So let's look at internal structures. Internal structures are ones that I've identified. Some of you know about them, some of you don't. I will go through them with you and explain to you what that is. Now, inside of each of these structures, it absolutely determines what you do, how you think, your range of motion. Everything is guided by that. You cannot get out of that once you're inside of one of those. You're governed by it, okay? So the first one is ambivalence, which we've talked about. So those of you who don't know, it'll be a refresher. Those of you who haven't heard of it before, you will be acquainted with it for the first time. Now, in ambivalence, what happens is it becomes very indecisive. You see people who can't make decisions on which way to go. Like my sister is the poster child for ambivalence. You go to a restaurant, she can't decide whether it should be steak or whether it should be chicken, and she could sit there for 20 minutes trying to decide that. So it really can be quite extreme. I don't know if you've seen people like that. Wherever they go, they always think that someplace else is the better place, is the better place to be. So ambivalence happens when somebody's like, for example, they want to get they want to start a career, they can't decide whether they should be a doctor, should be a lawyer, whatever. That all happens in ambivalence, and it governs, and they can't make up their mind. Well, no matter what decision they make, they always say, well, maybe I should have made a different decision. Next one is alienation. Alienation, you see that happen in relationships that have been going on for years, for example, and it's dead, or a job. The people are just kind of moving through it, kind of rote, but they're not really engaged, not really present to what's going on. And in alienation, the thing about alienation, there's no feeling in it. There's absolutely no feeling. So it's a place of numbness. So for people who want to, you try to talk to somebody about change, and they're in alienation, they can't, they don't have any dreams. That everything is kind of bland. And these are the kind of people who smoke pot all day, or they do video games all the time, or they're working at a job that they don't really like, whatever. That's alienation. And they are completely numb. Now, the reason for these things, by the way, they are progressively more challenging as you go forward. Ambivalence is easier to conquer than alienation, because alienation, the next thing is abandonment. And what happens in abandonment is that if you wake up and you realize that the job that you like, or the culture that you're in, you don't like it, or in a relationship you're in, you don't like it, then you have to do something about it. And doing something about it may mean leaving that relationship or leaving that job. That's really can be very, very painful. Most change, when people experience change, they experience it in abandonment. Abandonment always feels like loss. Now, the thing about that is that even if it's something that you don't want and you let go of it, it still feels bad. So you ever see, like sometimes we see people want to get rid of a habit like smoking, and they still feel bad about it. It still feels like a loss. Or leaving a relationship that is completely toxic, it still feels bad. Now, the other thing about abandonment, it doesn't matter what happens. If you hit the lottery, for example, then you think, oh my God, what if I lose the money? So everything is about loss. Everything is about that part of it. Now, once you get past that, like for example, I had a client who wasn't doing really well he was a salesperson, but he wasn't really successful at it. And I said, well, why are you not? And he says, well, I'm really afraid of going out and talking to people because they may say no. And that's the abandonment structure. Once we handled that, then we looked at all the things that he could do, and he started doing the things that he needed to do, making cold calls, going to see people, and then all of a sudden he had a lot more business. That moves you into abundance. Once you get out of abandonment, you can move into abundance, and then all of a sudden there's all these possibilities. And when you move into abundance, there's so many possibilities that it can overwhelm you. If you try to start a business, then you say, well, okay, which business is it going to be? And then you decide which business it's going to be. And once you decide that, then you got to decide, how you're going to market yourself and all these different things. It's just an unbelievable thing. We are in abundance as a society right now because of technology. Technology is giving us so many possibilities that we mostly are operating out of abundance. And one way to deal with that is to go back into alienation and just go, oh, forget it, this is just too much. And people kind of hide out there because abundance is something that you have to learn how to deal with. In order to get to where you want to go, you've got to be able to tolerate so much information, so many different possibilities, and you got to be able to go through that. If you go through that, what you start to do is you start to pull out things that are working. You start to get a little clearer. If you're in a business, you say, well, what kind of business? You start looking at the business that will give you the money within the time that you need, et cetera, et cetera. That moves you into integration, which is that you pull from abundance. You pull from abundance and you figure out what it is that you want. And I know a woman who put an ad out in the dating app, and she got 3,000 responses. And she was like, oh my God. So then she had to start figuring out, how do I sift through this? So she said, well, okay, well, she started looking at income. She created a filter. And that's what integration is. It creates a filter that you begin to look at what actually works for you. In integration, you can take a tremendous amount of information, and integration will process that information for you. It's magical. When you're in integration, all of a sudden, all these things that were disparate start to come together and you get clear. And once you have that kind of clarity, it's magical. It's amazing when you do that. Very few people get to integration. There are different parts of themselves that may be in integration with the other parts are not. There may be business integration, but then the relationships aren't. So that's really tricky. But once you are clear, once you know what's working and what's not working, then you can move to authority. And in business, we look at that in terms of amplification or scaling and those kinds of things, because you've worked out on a business level, you've worked out the systems. You work out the systems that are working for you, and then you're just doing the ones that work, and you're repeating that and expanding in that. In authority, there's two sides to authority. You see people who are in authority who feel like the authority is external, the boss, the society, or whatever. And then if you move to the internal side, you can recognize that these structures right here are what are governing you. So the mastery then becomes not letting any of these internal structures get in the way of you doing what it is that you want to do and have the joy that you want to have. Once you move into mastery and you become much more in sync with the universe, you become much more in sync with your own personal power and your ability to be highly effective with very little effort becomes magnified. So authority is mastery. It's amazing. And one of the reasons you can see why is that you're not letting any of these other internal structures get in the way. All right. Let's look at structure in terms of how normally people would deal with structure. So we've got actually, we don't even have the six. They don't have the six in here. I don't know why that's not in there. But anyway, the 6 internal structures should be on there. I don't know why it's not on there, but it should be on there. So if you look at these things over here, these are elements that may be part of a structure. So structures are not just one thing. They're broken up into different pieces. This is important now. Here's where the rubber meets the road. If you understand that structure is not one thing and it has different pieces to it, then you can say, well, okay, how do I create change? Rather than trying to change the whole structure, what you do is you zoom in on one thing that you can change. If you change the right thing, it'll make all the difference. If you change the wrong thing, it won't matter. For example, let's look at you want to start a business. We'll go back to the business again. Now, there are different elements over here. There could be things that you like. They could be whether you're in poverty or not. You may know what you're doing and not knowing what you're doing. It may be easy for you. It may be hard for you. There are certain trends in the world that really support you or won't support you. You either have capital or you don't. And COVID is one of those external things that are going on. So now, and then internal structures, what should be on there as one of those elements there. Some elements are structural, some elements are not structural. So if you think about a building, for example, I'm just going to kind of mix my metaphors here. If you look at a building, you've got, let's say, 4 pillars under the building there. the pillars under the building are very different than whether or not you have a, a really high-end stove, or whether or not the walls are green or not, or like that. So some things are really, really important. Some things are structural, some things are not. So what we want to do when we look at a structure, we say, well, what are the structural elements here? So let's look at whether you like something or not like something. Is that a structural element? No, it's just a preference. So you can change whether you like or don't like something, or a business, whatever, or way in which things are going. That's not a structural element. Whether it's easy for you or not easy for you, not a structural element. Now, whether you have the capital or not is a structural element, because having the capital or not having the capital makes all the difference in the world, depending upon the business, of course. So you can see the difference between liking something and not liking something, having capital and not having capital. Those are different things. So some of those things are structural elements. COVID is a structural element. If you want to open up a restaurant and there's COVID, that's a structural element. That will determine that will impact heavily on your success. Now, having said all of that, some structural elements are easier to change than others. So COVID, for example, wouldn't be something you'd be able to change. You're just not going to change COVID. It's a worldwide thing. You can't move around it. It's all over the world. Doesn't matter where you want to put the restaurant, COVID is there. So what we want to do is we want to look at structural elements that you can change. And if you do change them, will change everything else. Go back to our building. You got 4 pillars. If you knock out one pillar of the building collapses. It no longer can stay as it is. We call that a leverage point. Where you have the leverage point is you make that change, you change everything else. So I had a guy who didn't know how to, he was having problems with his wife, and he was back and reason ambivalence about it, and abandonment about it. I said, well, I'll tell you what could you do that would absolutely solve the problem for you? And he couldn't think of it. I said, well, if you go in and tell her that you're having an affair, then that would totally change the relationship. I mean, your relationship would be over. You know that the way this woman works, it would be over. So that just taking that one step would irrevocably change everything. So what do you want to do when you're trying to help people make change? When you're trying to make change, you have to look at what are the structural elements that you could change that would make all the difference in the world. Now, I'm going to submit to you that the one that you probably could change, the one that would be most determinative, would be one of the 6 internal structures. Fortunately, it's not listed on there, but we'll look at that in a minute. If we look at this between these 2 things, the external on the left, the internal on the right, the system that you employ is navigating these 2 different things. It's navigating the external and it's navigating the internal. If you change one of the internal structures, you change everything that you need to change. Because if, for example, you're in integration, you will pick the item on the external environment that best supports you. You will find the people who best support you. You will find the resources that best support you because you are in integration. That's why I say where we try to help people change the most is working on the internal structures, because that affects the external structure. It could be, deciding where you live and not being ambivalent about it. You could be making powerful choices and all that, but it all comes from the internal structures, how you experience the world. All right. Let's go back to where we started before, because this is how it comes full circle. Remember we talked about causality. Now, when things happen in the world, here's the sweet spot now. We're down to the final stretch here. I'm not going to keep going much longer than this. Think about the data that happens. You want to get a business, whatever like that, and you look and there's all these different possibilities, right? Where you experience that data is in the structural of the internal structures, that SE, that part there, that's where you start looking at that data, and you can look at it as, oh my God, this is like so big, yeah, whatever. That affects the content in terms of how you interpret that data. It goes through that filter. So if you change the internal structure, the way in which you look at that data, you can see the data is, oh my God, what a wonderful set of opportunities. Or you can look at it as being overwhelmed, and you can look at, oh my God, I'm going to fail at this thing. I'm not good enough at it. But it all comes out of these internal structures, which affects how you see it, and that affects how you interpret it, the meaning that you draw from that data. So it's not just data. It runs through this filter of internal structures. All right, I've said enough for right now. Let me give you guys an opportunity to react, question, challenge, anything you want to say. I know it's a lot to digest.
It makes a lot of sense. And my immediate feeling is resistance, because it's difficult to change your internal feelings, your likes, your resistances, what you're resisting. Not only what change you're resisting, but what you are scared of, where you're scared of going.
Yeah, but you're talking about other levels of causality. You're talking about a feeling level, you're talking about a belief level, you're talking about an action level. If you try to change on those levels, then it is difficult. So you're absolutely right, which is where most interventions happen, where most people try to change on that level, and you can't change you can't just tell people how to feel differently or whatever. They're not going to feel differently. You can't tell them to believe something differently. So it has to happen on a structural level, because the change can happen on those other levels in most cases. Very difficult, because people are, like you say, resistant to that. So what we can do is we can look at, for example, you can give us an example, and then we can look at where you are on the internal structural level, and then we can say, well, let's look at how that might play itself out. Can you say what you're talking about here? What are you trying to do?
There's nothing specific that I've a big resistance to, but maybe during this COVID period, I've not been working. So I've done some studying, ironically, on data analysis, which I found very interesting, and I wanted to make a career change towards that. So all the jobs that I've been applying for has been in that direction. And a couple of weeks ago, someone phoned me with a job opportunity, which is very interesting and very exciting, but totally not in the data analysis direction that I saw myself going in.
Okay, and so did you see it as an opportunity or as a conflict?
A little bit of both. I didn't say no. At the moment, we had an interview, and at the moment I'm on the short list. So I'm not planning to say no, but in the back of my mind, it's still but I wanted to do data analysis.
Okay, so you got a little bit of ambivalence, right? Like you wanted to do something else, but and this opportunity came. So so part of you is an ambivalence.
Yes, I would say so, yes.
Okay, good. But it sounds like there's a little bit of integration here, and that there's an opportunity for you here.
Yes.
So you see part of the opportunity and you have ambivalence. So you're in both places at the same time, on this thing. Can you see
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Anything else going on around that?
The main thing basically that I'm not in a position to say no to anything that comes my way.
Okay, so you're in a little bit of alienation. You're a little bit of alienation, like, I can do it, but I'm not really excited about it. And a little bit of authority in that the external world is dictating some of your choices, is influencing some of your choices. So there's some degree of powerlessness there, authority, which is putting you a bit in alienation because you don't, there's parts of it you don't really like. There's parts of it that really work for you with integration, and there's parts of you that doesn't work for you, which puts you in ambivalence. So you're operating out of 4 different structures at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So the way in which I would work with you as a coach, for example, I said, well, let's look at integration and say, which is the thing that, how can we design this thing that it works for you? Maybe it's doing this job for a little while, maybe, and pursuing the other thing later or simultaneously. There would have to be some design question about that to see if we can get it into more integration, depending upon what how much of an authority, how much the issue is an authority, like what you need and how much you need right now, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you see, if you go into integration, then you can make peace with the decision that you've made. You say, okay, so this doesn't have all of what I want right now in this moment, but I'm going to bring in the other pieces. I'm going to put together a plan so that it all lines up. Because right now there's an immediate need. Okay.
There's also a bit of fear because this is really a whole new career direction for me, and the
fear of
feeling
what?
that fear of failure.
So you're in abandonment as well. Oh my God, I may lose.
I just keep
so you got 5 of the 6 all going on. We're gonna find abundance in you soon, I'm sure. So fear of failure. Okay. What does failure look like? And what does it mean to fail?
This is definitely a long-term decision because it's a very big learning curve. It's not something that I can or really want to abandon after 6 months or a year. So the fear is that somehow I don't have what they see in me, what they see I can do, and I don't do it. And
and what happens? You get fired, or you have to start all over again?
Contract don't get renewed, or
so you're afraid you might have to start all over again.
That too, yes.
Okay. What's the other part? You said that too. What's the other part?
I just don't like that feeling of not being able to do something. I think Roxanne mentioned it in last week's session that I listened to. She also said fear of failure. I just don't. I often rather not try, just so that I won't fail.
Okay, so in any process, okay, you have to go to abundance, and in abundance, there's going to be a lot of failure. It's the nature of the beast. You have to fail a lot in the beginning because that's the nature of the beast. If you're a salesperson, you talk to 100 people, you say the statistics are, 10% are going to say yes, but 90% of them are going to say no. So what you're saying is that you're not willing to go into abundance because you are in abandonment. So the solution for you is to go into abundance, try all kinds of things, not try to make it perfect right now. Learn, see, discover, find out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and at least you're moving. You're moving. If you're trying to skip abundance and go right into integration. You're trying to get it right. And you can't get it right without having gone through abundance. You don't know enough. You don't have enough experience in this enough yet. But if you don't actually go to abundance and you stay in abandonment, everything you try, anytime you don't get it right, you're going to see that as a loss. You're going to see that as a failure. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So the key to this is try. Open it up. Just let it all out. Just go with it. Don't worry about anything other than getting the experience and getting clearer. Once you get clearer, you'll be able to move into integration. Pick out what works for you, what doesn't. You're trying to skip over that part, and it's a problem because you can't do it. You're in abandonment, which is driving this whole thing of yours. It's abandonment. And so the solution for you right now is going to be abundance. Open it up. Allow for lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of possibilities, and be confused and not know and learn. And from there, you'll move into integration. It'll get much clearer for you.
Tony, would you say it's like almost like a trial and error situation? Like you try something out.
It is like
you try all the things. You try all the things out, and you kind of figure out where it is, what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. You got to dive in. You don't know. It's like, oh my God, or how am I going to do this? You just dive in. You just dive in, not knowing, and you just jump in. You jump into the water. It looks turbulent, but you just jump in. You got to jump in. And then
that's the hard part.
Yeah. But that allows you to move forward, because if you want to go straight to integration, you'll sit and study all day and try to make sure it makes sense and No, jump right in. You want to be successful? Jump right into abundance. Just jump in. You got to learn to tolerate this massive amount of uncertainty. I mean, it can be massive. When I say massive, I mean really massive.
Yeah.
Successful people, really successful people, that's how they do it. They get just a little or enough information that they, generally speaking, mess with it, and they go. 2%, 5%, 10%, depending upon the person, but it's usually a very low amount of information.
Okay.
The people who fail sit and want to get 60% information, 70% information. They want to get all this information before they move forward, and they sit there and and it won't work. You can't do it. You can't even learn it sitting in abandonment. You can't do it.
Okay.
You got to jump in. You got to jump in.
Okay. Well, that's my only option at the moment anyway. So
there's a book called
we'll be jumping to the done.
There's a book called Fire, Ready, Aim, and it talks about that. You shoot the gun, then you get ready, and then you aim the gun. You got to jump in first. The last thing you do is aim. Get moving. More comments. Okay. Thank you, Pepsi. More comments on this or any other part of this?
I would like to say that, one of the things is that I've been looking for jobs in either IT or energy for quite a while, 4 years, and I haven't been successful. And what happened was that I hit a glass ceiling where I was earning the maximum that I could earn doing what I was doing. So I've been trying to say, well, okay, the way to solve the problem is not to be doing software anymore, it's to be doing energy. And something else that's happened in the past 3 or 4 months is I've realized how to use LinkedIn. Because up until then, I was using LinkedIn and getting on job boards. And the thing with me is I've never got a job through a recruitment consultant. I'm 57 years old, and I've never got a job through a recruitment consultant. I've always got jobs either directly, full-time, or because of my own work. Now, I realize that if I get into groups on LinkedIn and I comment, or I look at the, let's suppose McKinsey and Company post something, or whoever, British Airways post something, and then they get 3,000 likes and 200 comments. Now, what you do is you go and you look, who liked this? Okay, who commented? And you find a comment that's applicable to something that interests you. And then you write to that person, you send them a connect message, and you say, you've just written this, and this is really interesting. Maybe we can have a discussion about this. So I've been doing that. And about 2 weeks ago, a guy wrote something, and I messaged him and I said, I see that you're looking for staff selling aircraft parts. And he said, yes, we are. Do you know anything about aircraft? I said, well, I've done 45 hours of flying, including 15 hours solo. It was in 1986 in a previous life. I am interested in aircraft, etc. He says, well, why don't you come and sell for us? So I had 2 meetings. They sent me a contract. I didn't like part of it. I sent it to my lawyer. He looked at it. He said, well, just say this. You don't need to change the contract, which I've done. And I started yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. Now, the thing is, the reason the contract is not a contract. It's a contract which allows you to be in or out. Okay, the more you do, the more you get. They're not paying me. It's a commission-only contract. Okay, so that gives me ultimate flexibility. Now, I'm not going to stop all of that work I've been doing for the past 4 years. So perhaps what I'm trying to say is, you get an outlier that comes in unexpectedly, and you know that you've got a huge learning curve. But you discover, like I'm discovering, that most of the issue in this particular job is administration and systems. You need to be able to track everybody you've spoken to, what you spoke to them about, what did they want, when do they want it by, what's the urgency, etc. That's all administration stuff. I'm an expert at that. So the fact that it's selling aircraft parts is like 10% of the issue. The other 90% is what I'm actually really good at. But I'm not going to stop the opportunities that might come in IT and energy just because of this job. I'd like this job to be fantastic because I could sell 1 aircraft engine a year and I could make more money than I could make in 10 lifetimes, but the chance of that happening is like winning the lottery. So, but it could happen. So I don't think that one should be turning down something because it's in the outfield. But, if someone puts you on 3 months probation, for example, while you start saying that you've never done before, and then a week later, you get the job you've always wanted, well, then you give the probation company notice, just like they would have given you notice. So, there's no real loyalty at the beginning.
There's no abandonment issue there.
And there's no abandonment at the beginning for you or for the company you're working for. Right. So you see what I'm trying to get to, perhaps, that I'm trying to say, well, you can take an opportunity that's out there and then still keep these opportunities hot whilst you see what happens. Maybe the opportunity is just so abundant that you never expected and it's wonderful. And you think, why didn't I do this before? Or in a month or two, this other opportunity arrives and you say, okay, I'm going back to what I really want to be doing. Good. So that's like in the back of my mind.
Great example.
And Tony, this has all happened since I started talking to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's an energy system thing going on. And
so I get all the credit, huh?
My issue is I always give all the credit away.
Well, so let's look at what you described and let everybody take note of that. That sounds wonderful, David. I'm really happy for you. So what you did was you started strategizing inside of abundance. So you started strategizing inside of abundance. And from there, you're saying, well, probably I'm going to become more integrated. Either this is going to work for me or I'm going to discover something else. but you moved right into abundance, and you started playing around with possibilities and you strategized. Fantastic example. Fantastic.
Thanks.
I would also say, though, that part of the reason why probably it's helping you is that you're getting more support. You know, this is more of a support system where all you needed was a little bit of support. So it moved you out of abandonment and moved you into abundance. So people can, you're part of a team, you're part of a group, and then that helped you move into abundance. I would predict. That's probably.
You know, the day before I passed my motorbike license, I went for a haircut. So after I passed my motorbike license, I phoned the hairdresser and I said, "Thank you very much, you helped me pass." She said, "I had nothing to do with it." I said, "You had a big part to do with it because you made me look good."
Okay, there we go. All right, anybody else on this? Anybody else have an issue that maybe something you're struggling with and maybe something you're not clear about? Or any comments on what we've talked about? Please, anybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. I don't know, listen, I've been in and out of the conversation because my son got home at a dish up. So if I'm a little bit off track, just sort of move me back on track a little bit. But I just picked up here and there what Bobsy said and what David said about what Bobsy said. If I got it correct, Bobsy got a job offer and it wasn't really what it was that she had initially wanted.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's not just sorry, I mean, it's not just what she didn't necessarily want. It's in a different field to where she was looking. That's the core piece of it.
Okay. So always in a situation where you uncertain about, should I do it or should I not do it? It's like applying to Princeton, Harvard, and MIT, and you get accepted at all three. But you would love to go to all three. Which one do you go to? Do you ever really know what the correct answer is? That's why you throw it back at into the universe, and you tell the universe, well, this is what I've got. I have no idea what the right decision is, because I don't know if I choose Princeton instead of MIT, I might meet my husband at Princeton. It may not be the best of the three, but who knows where my good luck lies. So it may be if you go to MIT, you may fail your first year. You don't really know what it is that you need to do with the decision or the options that are presented to you. So it's almost as if I'm saying to you, you have this opportunity. It's in a different field. You don't know if it's really wrong, or maybe you'll meet someone there who may be of service to you for the rest of your life. I don't know whether you step in there for a week or 2 weeks or not at all. So it's almost as if I'm saying, just take this opportunity, give it to the universe and say, if this is the right thing for me, then open up the door. If it's not, then put me on another path, because we may ultimately not know ourselves what the correct option is for that. Sorry, I just needed to.
No, that's a good point. It's a good point. It depends on where you're standing, because you stood in 3 different places when you responded to that. The first one was ambivalence. You got 3 different possibilities, so you could be stuck there, and that could be paralyzing when you don't know which one, and then you know, how do I decide? But if you're actually deciding from where you wound up, from authority, that the universe help guide you, and you move into integration. Integration will help you identify and help you attract the right response. It'll help you integrate that information and help you come up with the right choice, working with the universe. This gets a little bit more complicated than what we can handle today, but I mean, you jumped all the way to authority, which is very few people are able to stand there at causality. They usually are in ambivalence and they try to figure it out and so forth. But you jumped right to the end, which is amazing. But if you are able to do that, and you're working with integration, then all of that complexity melts away and the decision becomes clear.
Exactly. And I think it takes the load and weight off your shoulders, because you know that it's not really, you just leave it up to the universe, and if things don't go well and you say, then it's not meant for me, then whatever it is, because you know the universe is deciding for you. So it just makes life easier. Yeah. It's almost as if it takes all the pressure of life off your shoulders.
What
It really does.
what I have done when I was learning how to do integration is I just when COVID hit, I didn't call anybody. I didn't do anything for like 2 months. I just did my clients. That was it. And I just said, universe, send me the right people. And so my phone barely rung. And then I knew whoever called me, I knew those were the people to talk to. And so the whole path, my whole life evolved out of allowing things to come to me. And what and the trick to the integration piece was to just say yes to what I want to say yes to. And you can identify the pieces of what you want to say. There could be parts of what you want. So you have an apple pie. You say, well, you know, if I eat apple pie, I'm going to get fat, but I really like apple pie. And so what I allowed myself to do was to say yes to eating of the pie, even though there was a part of me that says, as a way of creating a pathway forward. That's a little bit more advanced than what we're going to do today, but you jump there, and of course you're going to always challenge us, Amina, to go to the highest levels. So I did that for your sake. All right. Any final anybody else want to share any insights into this, any opinions about it, any place where you feel like you're stuck? This is Speak Now, Forever Hold Your Peace. All right, any comments on what you've heard tonight? You like it, you don't like it? Takeaways, any takeaways?
I like the map between the external and internal. I like that there's things that are, it's kind of almost like everything internal is 100% in my control, even though I might not realize that it's in my control. I might have given control away.
Right.
The things that are external, they're pretty much not in my control. I mean, I would say that health is directly in my control, and I would put that in the middle, but that's okay. You know, I would say, and the other things are, and my ability is in my control to some extent, you know, depending on whether I can go to Princeton or Harvard, those might help. But on the other hand, maybe I don't want to go to those two. Maybe I'm happy with Cranfield. So that gives us a fourth option. But I just like that there's the mapping. And so you use the one system to help and reinforce the other system.
Yes. Well, just to say things, for example, like health, sometimes health can be completely outside of your control. You get hit by a car, and so it's no longer in your control. So, you know, you may get poisoned or something or whatever. So, you know, so but getting in the car and all of that stuff like that, you could say, well, all right, so maybe you had control in that respect. But some things are external to, at least on the surface, are external to it. So ability, you know, you don't have the ability, David, that I can think that I know of, to run a 4-minute mile or 3-minute mile. You probably can't do that, even no matter how hard you practice, and you certainly can't do a 2-minute.
Well, if you allowed me to reboot my life, I might better do it.
2-minute mile is just anatomically not possible. So at this stage. All right. So the point is that, but you're absolutely right that there's a continuum, and not all of health is external. None of these things are all external, and they can operate anywhere in between on that continuum, based on the choices that you made, based on the internal structures that you were in. That absolutely controls what the external is as well. You all get that? That the internal controls what the external is. To get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The way I feel about myself may change whether I'm poor or rich, either in money or in 100 other things.
Yeah, the choice. If you're afraid of abandonment, you may not take risk, which may lead you into poverty, and so forth. So it's, you know, you may choose something to please somebody else, but you're not successful because it's not really about you. It's not really what's best for you. It may be based on something else. So these things absolutely affect those things.
Your alienation, which I put apathy down here. I know you didn't say apathy, might lead you to have the custom of living in a bad relationship as a codependent. So yeah, the internal is really is making the external worse.
Yes.
Or better.
Yes. You're always very good at this, David. You're very facile with new ideas. I'm always amazed at how well you do that. You're very good at that. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
So thank you for your contribution. Thank you all for coming. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. Next week, what we're going to do is look at the system side of this, and look at how to design we have a whole system we call the dog track, which integrates everything that we just talked about, and put it all together next week and show you how to move through this thing really, really fast and being able to navigate all these different pieces. So that's what's up for next time. Thank you all for coming. What we're doing is a beta testing this and how easy it is, what it's easy to see and do, whatever. And once we get through that first iteration here, we'll open it up for other people to come in and let's see what we can create out of this. Maybe it's small groups or whatever, to like mastermind groups, whatever. We're not clear on this. We're totally in abundance here, and we haven't at all moved to integration. But thank you for participating in the abundance and being troopers that you are. I really appreciate the support. And if you have any other comments, if you could put it on the in our group, that would be helpful. I will share this video with folks who weren't able to make it. We now have a YouTube channel. I will post this there as well. I would ask that you subscribe to that just so that you can see stuff as it's coming through, and also to start building up the system by which to do that. Thank you all again. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tony.
Tony.
Good night.
Absolutely. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.